Hello, everyone. Welcome to the state of Kentucky, our live show that we're doing every Friday. Really glad to have you with us. We have some special guests today. In a few minutes, we're going to be talking with Mike Broihier, one of the candidates for Senate here in Kentucky. And after that, we're going to talk to Dustin Pugel from KCEP about the budget and about what the legislature should be doing in the midst of the coronavirus. I want to share a couple of things first. As you can see, we have increased our production values a little bit. Maybe every week we'll do a little bit more of that. And with the coronavirus, maybe we'll eventually build an in-house studio and sit there. But I want to be sure that everybody knows that the coronavirus website, we talked about this last week. This is the Kentucky State Coronavirus site. I highly encourage you to visit it. It's very well done, has a lot of good information. Also, if you comment on Facebook, we can see the comments and we may even actually show them in the broadcast. If you have questions for either of our guests when they're on, if you'll comment, we can perhaps share those with them and get you an answer there. We are continuing to put up the update every morning from Governor Beshear's press conferences. Let me show you whoops, let me go back to the correct screen here. All right, let me show you what that looks like. So every morning on our site, we're putting up the update from the press conference of the day before, as well as the video of the press conference. This is a summary done by the people at Kentucky Health News. It's very well done. It's a great way to keep up. You can scan through the bullets. They are also including not only what Governor Beshear is saying, but updates from other places and other news outlets. And then if you want, the entire video is underneath that and you can watch the entire press conference. This is a very good source of information. I highly encourage you to take a look at it. So let's talk about coronavirus and the show for a minute. It struck me earlier in the week that the coronavirus in Kentucky really has three parts. It has obviously a medical part, and we tried all week to get somebody on to talk about testing and why it is so difficult to get testing set up. We were not able to get anybody who would come on the show and talk about it. I did read a story that explains some of it, but for now, I'm gonna let the medical part go. We did have Anna Whites on last week to talk about telehealth. Then there's the economic impact, and that's one reason Dustin is on, is we want to talk about, in the light of the tremendous economic impact this is having on the state, what should the government be doing about it? What should our politicians be doing about it and our state government? And then finally, there's the political aspect, where even though we're in the middle of this crisis with health and economic, there's still political things going on. People still are running campaigns and trying to figure out how to do that. And that's why we're glad to have Mike on to talk with us. So let's bring Mike on right now and let him talk to us about how he's handling this and what his world is looking like these days. So Mike Broihier, candidate for U.S. Senate, welcome to the state of Kentucky.
Bruce, so nice to be here, and I appreciate you reaching out and doing this, because this is the way we're going to have to do business, I think, at least for a little while, maybe next 3 months or so. And I'm pretty comfortable doing it. I've been in this space before. I ran a program in Afghanistan for over a year, about 50 guys, and I'd only see them when they're coming and going on vacation. And so talking to people via text and Skype, and back then it was mostly Skype, but email, it's a pretty comfortable space for me.
Good. So let me ask you a couple of questions. First of all, just the general question that you ask any candidate: how's the campaign going?
Well, it's going well. You probably noticed, I've seen the news about 2 weeks ago. Well, now it's going on 3 weeks ago. The time really is going by so fast. A large number of Andrew Yang's national staff came and joined us here in Kentucky. Oh. And what a huge shot in the arm it's been. I got to tell you, Bruce, I bite my tongue every time I say kids, but sadly these days, everyone's looking like a kid to me. But these kids are young and smart and know what the heck they're doing, and they brought a level of intensity and energy that I spoke back in, I guess, August. So it's been a bit of a grind, and I was kind of hitting a little bit of a dip, because it was mostly my wife Lynn and I just slugging it out every single day. And then out of nowhere come these Yang Gangers. And I mean, they drove here from Iowa, New Hampshire, Seattle, West Virginia, and just a huge shot in the arm, and really, really upped our game in our campaign.
That's cool. About how many are there?
Well, golly, there's about 10. And
Wow.
yeah, and just top-notch people. I mean, people who ran ground campaign in Iowa, and communications director, and fundraisers are, I mean, these are just national level professional presidential campaign staff kind of people, and just have wowed me at their intensity and intelligence and hard work.
That's excellent. So let's talk about, how are you doing your campaign now that we're all stuck at home and so on and so forth? So what are you doing?
Well, this was a grassroots campaign from the beginning. And so for the first 7 or 8 months, it was every single county Democratic Women's Club who called, or county Democratic committee, executive committee, or whoever wanted to talk. I mean, we just get in the car and start driving. And miraculously, in the first, until January, we never even had to reschedule an event. Things just broke our way. Now, doing this digitally is fine. Like I said, this is a comfortable space for me, and less time in the car, surely driving around. But the other night, the Kentucky National Organization for Women had a candidate forum that was done online, and none of the other candidates showed up. They're just too busy. And so the Kentucky Now just very generously, instead of canceling, which would have been completely understandable, gave me the whole hour. So I spent an hour just fielding questions from followers of Kentucky Now, and I think 20 minutes after we closed it out, there'd been over 2,500 views. And so you can get your word out. I participated in another candidate forum that was out of Lexington, and that was a little bit. It was just after we started doing it. So I'm sorry, it was out of Hardin County, and so challenges. But again, people can stay at home, stay safe, remain there, keep their distance from people, but still participate in the process.
So I've seen some of your ads. I was really impressed. I've always been impressed with your ads. I thought your launch ad was amazing. And I've seen the latest ones against Corona Mitch. They have gotten lots of attention. Are they getting traction? Are people sharing them? Are you hearing them? Are you getting response?
Oh, absolutely. There's 2 ways to judge it. You can just look at, you can go to ActBlue, what the source of donations are, and nationwide, tons of small dollar donors. You know what the source is, but also the volume of trolls who showed up on my social media site. If that's an indication, if you're hitting home, judge it by the number of people who are talking about, you're a Nazi, KKK, whatever it is. Okay. When the hate level rises, you're hitting close to the mark.
Well,
can I say something else, Bruce?
Sure.
The last 2 videos, the Corona Mitch ones, were produced by a young man named Oliver DeClive Lowe, who's 15 or 16, I think, and he lives in Louisville. And he is the younger brother of my campaign manager, and the kid is just smart and funny and completely engaged.
That's amazing, because they are really good. And I'm intrigued with the small dollar donors. That's obviously where your campaign is getting a lot of its funding. Is that still going on? You still getting good donor there?
Oh yeah, yesterday was a great day. Yesterday was the best day in the preceding 8 or 9, 10 days, I guess. And a lot of those were driven. I'm still hitting the phones, and the good thing about this. Good thing, I hate to say it, but you get a lot of people on the phone because they're home. And so you have an opportunity to talk to people, spend 10 minutes on the phone talking about your platform. But a combination of some pretty aggressive campaign ads and the penetration of the Yang Gang digitally. And these kids are kids. Please give me the high sign if I say kids again, Bruce, because I don't want to make anybody mad. But they're much more tech savvy than I am. They brought a level of sophistication that I never had, so they have a far reach. And I've done a couple podcasts. People with hundreds of thousands of viewers. And you know what? I'd rather have 100,000 people give a buck than that's because that shows that you're getting some traction.
So we have a question that's come in from a viewer. So let me put that on the screen. It says, what are some major projects you've managed in your career? Without going through the whole resume, you want to talk about that for just briefly?
Yeah, well, let's walk backwards. The last major program I oversaw was a physical security program for NATO in Afghanistan. The entrance to all the bases in Kabul, the people who were actually doing the physical security checks, looking for bombs and looking for contraband. That was one of my programs. Before that, physically on the ground in Afghanistan, I was program manager. And the same thing, I had 50 guys, and we had probably 300, 400 systems that scanned for bombs. And my guys, including my son, were working right on the edge, right at the edge of the base between the good guys and the bad guys. And let's see, other major programs. And the last thing I'll talk about is that for 2 years, I was the Marine Corps' lead war planner in Korea for 2 years, 2000, 2002. And, every single day working with our allies, very great allies in the Republic of Korea, and planning for the defense of the Republic, and how were we going to move a huge amount of U.S. forces to the peninsula from the United States and other bases overseas to defend our good allies, the ROCs, against North Korean aggression. Those were probably the last 3 programs I managed.
Okay. Before we wrap up, because I told you we wanted to keep it to about 10 minutes, what's the website?
It's mikeforky.com, mikeforky.com. All my issues are there. All the videos are there. And of course, as usual, an opportunity to donate, which we wouldn't miss. And there's also the store where you can buy the cool Moscow Mitch Spread the Red poster and T-shirt. So
I thought that's what that was. I wasn't going to ask, but yeah, I saw that.
It's funny. It's featured prominently in one of my fellow Democrats who's running for office, one of their ads. And if you look very, very closely next to the picture, there's a picture of me. So I enjoy seeing a picture of art that I paid for and my dumb face in an ad for one of our other Democratic candidates for U.S. Senate. That always makes me laugh. That's
excellent. All right. So I almost always wind up interviews with candidates with the same question, which is, you're standing on my porch. Of course, now you can't be standing on my porch, but if you're standing on my porch, why should I vote for you?
You vote for because I am the one person who can beat Mitch McConnell. You know my resume, Bruce. We're not going to run through it, but I'm a retired combat veteran. I'm a former educator who's taught every grade from K through college, and I'm a farmer. I farmed the ground in Lincoln County in Kentucky for the last 15 years. We're talking about bend over, picking crops kind of farming, and that cuts a wide swath. I can talk to people of Kentucky. I can win the Democrats, and I can win over enough of the pro-Trump Democrats and anti-Mitch Republicans to tip the scales and rid our republic of Mitch McConnell.
Cool. Mike Broihier, candidate for U.S. Senate, thank you so much for your time, and good luck.
Thanks, Bruce. It's always a pleasure to see you, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other face-to-face without killing each other one of these days soon.
That'd be good. Thanks, Mike.
All right, my friend. See you soon.
That was Mike Broihier, candidate for U.S. Senate. We have reached out to the other 2 major candidates in this race, Charles Booker and Amy McGrath. We have Charles on next Friday. We have not heard back from the McGrath campaign. We all know that the coronavirus crisis is causing huge economic impact, and it could get much worse, and we know that. We are fortunate in Kentucky that we have an amazing group of people called the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, who do wonderful work and very solid data-based, research-based analysis of economic issues in our state. So I want to bring in Dustin Pugel. He is a senior policy analyst with KCEP. I always call it KCEP, but I always have to remember not everybody knows that it's Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. Dustin, welcome to the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about KCEP's work, because I'm sure that many people who are listening or watching are not really aware of what KCEP does.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think you set it up well. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit research organization. We're based out of Berea, but we kind of live all over the state and drive to the office or into Frankfurt, though not so much these days. And our goal is to make sure that we are looking at and providing good analysis for state policy and a little bit federal policy when it pertains to Kentucky. With an aim at making sure our policy improves the lives of all Kentuckians, especially folks who are struggling to make ends meet and sort of the middle class. So we've been around for coming up on 10 years now, actually. And there's several of us, and we work on largely tax and budget issues, although we also work on safety net issues, criminal justice reform, and several other issues pertinent to folks here in the Commonwealth.
Excellent.
And actually, it's funny. You're right. I don't think a lot of people will know the acronym KCEP, but I think a lot of people might know the name Jason Bailey, who's my boss and is the one who started up the organization.
Right. Let me remind everybody that if you comment, and it's not just on Facebook, you can also comment on YouTube. So I need to change that banner. We can see them and we might show them in the broadcast. There's all sorts of things we could talk about. There's always a lot of interesting economic stuff going on, but let's talk about budgets.
Sure.
We have a House budget. We have now a Senate budget. They're not the same. I know that Kentucky Center for Economic Policy does analysis of the budgets, and I would encourage anybody who wants to really understand what's in the budgets to go to kypolicy.org and go read the analysis. But real quickly, Dustin, what would you like to see changed, or what's wrong in the House budget? Let's do that one first.
Well, honestly, the House budget and the governor's budget were not all that different. Both were constrained by what's likely going to be one of the worst couple of years for revenue that we've seen in a long time, and that was before the layoffs and the shutdowns coming from the virus. So, the real issue with both of the budgets was that both the governor's budget and the House budget, because they were so similar, is the fact that we just don't have a lot of revenue. There's not a lot of money to spend, and especially as we went through comprehensive tax reform a couple of years ago and gave away hundreds of millions of dollars by lowering the top tax rate, by doing corporate tax cuts, and then the following year doing more tax cuts, specifically the bank franchise tax. We really eroded our ability to invest in critical public services. So, the governor's budget was okay. I mean, it made some ground. It gave state employees a raise for the first time in, really for the third time in the last 11 years. The House budget followed suit. The governor had a $2,000 bonus or increase in pay for teachers. The House reduced that to the same increment that everyone else was getting, which was 1%. And so, the House budget did a couple of good things. It funded the need-based scholarships really well compared to previous years. It increased the eligibility rate for childcare and preschool. We got about halfway to where I think most advocates want us to go by raising it from 160% to 175% of the poverty level, which is $26,200 for a family of four.
Right.
It fully funded pensions. It got closer to funding pensions for the quasi-governmental agencies, so police departments, domestic violence shelters, regional universities. Although both the governor's budget and the House budget left a gap. that they would need to make up, which is troubling right now, to say the least.
Sure.
As they were already going to have to pick up a large tab essentially for their parts of the budget. I'm sorry, for their parts of the pensions. And so, it was a modest increase from what we've seen, but again, without real serious increases in revenue, it was going to be hard to do much of anything. And I think that's what we ended up seeing.
And then the Senate budget that just came out made some fairly dramatic changes. You want to talk about those quickly?
Yeah, I think Senator Buford from Jessamine County referred to it as a scorched earth budget.
Right.
I think I might call it an austerity budget. I mean, it was a pretty significant departure from what the House and the governor had proposed. It didn't really have any of the meaningful increases that we saw in either of those cases. I mean, even the House, the governor proposed 350 social workers. The House lowered that to 50 social workers, and then some increase in pay for the existing social workers and incoming social workers.
Right.
And then the Senate kept the 50 new social workers, but then actually cut the increase in pay pretty significantly and changed that up. They also got rid of extra funding for they got rid of most of the extra funding for quasi-governmental agencies' pensions. They seem to really target the teacher pensions. They essentially said, all $1.1 billion that we've set aside for teachers' pensions, we're going to put that in a parking lot of something that Governor Bevin created called the Permanent Pension Fund. And we're not actually going to put that into your pension system unless we make serious structural changes by August 1st. And if you guys don't, agree to those changes, then we're just going to instead put all of that into the state employees pension system, KRS, which seems pretty extreme and would not be a good move given the kind of sort of economic outlook we're facing. So, the Senate's budget was a significant, like I said, departure from the governor's and House budget. And of course, now they're moving into a free conference committee as they usually do. Sounds like they're going to spend Monday through Wednesday haggling and coming up with an agreement. And then they're going to come back Thursday and pass whatever that ends up being. And we'll find out then.
Yeah. I pretty well know the answer to this, but because I've, attended your all's conferences and talked with you. But the general problem here is less about the individual details and more about the fact that we basically don't have enough revenue to even do the basics.
That's right.
Much less to actually make things better.
Yeah.
So we got a question that actually leads into that really well from comments. So let me put this up. What are some ways that we could increase revenues? And I'm sure that you have a whole package of them maybe in your back pocket. So let's talk about what the legislature should be doing instead of cutting taxes. What they should be doing instead.
Well, we actually have a whole report on that I did not write, but Jason Bailey and our senior fellow Pam Thomas, who spent a couple decades writing every revenue bill that the state has seen,
wow, yeah,
RC put together. And so I would encourage people to look there. But, really the bottom line is we need a progressive tax reform package that asks more of those who have more and doesn't put the burden on folks who have less, which is what we currently have. And we can do that in a number of ways, including by raising the top bracket back to where it was before or higher. Right now, we don't tax what's called parimutuel wagering, which is basically slot machines in disguise, the way we tax other things and the way we probably should tax it, and that could raise a large amount of money. Some of the proposals that are out there now don't raise a whole lot. For example, taxing sports or passing and then taxing sports betting would only raise probably $5 or $10 million. Medical marijuana, if we truly call that medicine, we wouldn't be taxing that at all. Maybe it would just bring in a little bit of payroll tax, and occupational tax. So there's not really a whole lot of proposals being sent out right now, but again, I would encourage people to go to our website and check out the revenue options that strengthen the Commonwealth report that we put out.
Right.
A lot of good opportunities there. And Another thing just to point out, we have been recovering from the Great Recession for 10 years now. And during that time, we didn't replenish our rainy day fund. We didn't pass progressive tax reform to increase our budget. And now we have a budget that, as a share of GDP, is as low as it's ever been since we've been tracking that. And we're about to go into a situation where we have even less revenue. So we've really sort of been screwing up for a while now, instead of investing in what really matters for Kentuckians.
And we continue to give away money in tax breaks. And I know there is a bill, at least one, that is supposed to be forming a tax break review committee.
That would be great.
Review, and sunset some of them. Mm-hmm. So I just want to quickly, and I don't want to hold you up too long, I want to ask about that pari-mutuel betting thing, because that came up at the conference, and I was just kind of like dumbfounded by the whole thing. So we're talking about these slot machines that, even though we don't have casino gambling, are allowed because they're supposedly historic horse racing.
That's correct.
And which is baloney, but that's okay. And we don't tax those anywhere like other states do.
Correct. And
that's because of the horse lobby, I assume.
That's a political question. I'm not sure. I'm a policy analyst. But yeah, I mean, if we, again, I'm not the tax expert on our staff, but if we taxed it at the rate we probably should be, we could raise close to $100 million.
Wow.
So I think there's a real argument to be made there that this is an undertaxed industry that is not paying its fair share, and that, especially moving into sort of a tight belting time for the state, at least, we need to really second guess that policy.
Okay. So let me ask you one last question. In the midst of what we're in the middle of, if you were advising the state legislature, what should they be doing in terms of dealing with the coronavirus from an economic and tax standpoint?
Well, the first and most important thing that the Senate needs to do right now is pass Senate Bill 150. And I don't know how much people were paying attention to this yesterday, but there were two coronavirus response bills that were making their way through. There was, I think it was Senate Bill 177 and Senate Bill 150. They both dealt with different things. Senate Bill 177 had to do with hairdressers. 150, sadly, was actually a really good bill around surprise medical billing and banning it. It was Senator Alvaro's bill, but in an attempt to move quickly, the House gutted it, and they replaced it with language that would help support small businesses, independent contractors, and most importantly, it would really give a lot of leeway for the governor around unemployment insurance.
Okay.
And we've been talking a lot about this lately, but it passed out of the House committee unanimously. It passed out of the House unanimously. It got to concurrence in the Senate, and they pulled it, said we'll get back to it. So it does a few really, really important things. Currently, right in Kentucky, and for quite a while now, only 1 in 5 unemployed workers actually receive unemployment insurance. And unemployment insurance only makes up about 45% of lost wages for folks who actually get it. So there are a few things we can do and do quickly to make sure that as people are being laid off, in part because of the important sort of social distancing closures that have happened, but also because of a general economic slowdown globally and the rest of the country that affects Kentuckians, we need to do things like adopting an alternative base period, which would help bring on an additional 1 in 5 workers in unemployment insurance. We need to waive the waiting week, which Governor Beshear did by executive order, but it would be good to have that in law as well, or at least giving him statutory authority to do that. We need to make sure that we are maximizing benefit awards as people are able to draw down that extra money, because wage replacement helps the broader economy. It helps families make ends meet. And we need to make sure that just generally the governor is able to respond quickly to federal incentives that are coming down. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act that the Senate and House passed in DC, and I believe has been signed by President Trump, I'm not sure, provides a lot of extra funding so long as states pick up some of these measures that I just mentioned. And so part of that funding is 100% federally funded extended unemployment benefits. Currently, in Kentucky, you only get it for 26 weeks.
Right.
Past that, you either get cut off, or if the federal government extends that, then the state kind of picks up half of that. In this case, the federal government would pick up 100% of the tab, so long as Kentucky picks up some of these other things. Oh, one other thing that really helps with reducing layoffs is something called work sharing, where instead of
Sure.
an employer having to lay you off entirely, they can actually just reduce your hours, and then unemployment insurance can come in and pick up a portion of the wages that you lost because your hours were reduced.
Right.
That would be a huge help in ensuring that people remain attached to the labor force, that employers have experienced folks on the job, and that we don't end up with more economic harm than what we're dealing with now. So all of that is in Senate Bill 150, and it only needs one vote. So I think
there you go.
Encouragement would be for folks to pick up the phone and call their senator and urge them to pass Senate Bill 150 post haste.
Okay. I want to put up your website, make sure everybody knows where it is. We had some people ask, where's the website, so I can go get the revenue suggestions.
Yes.
And all the things that you just outlined, is there a possibility that they'll be up somewhere in terms of here's what the legislature should be doing?
Yes, we so we have an unemployment insurance blog, and we have a one-pager that cites specific statutes that need to change, and people can do that pretty easily on our website. I think it's still maybe even on our homepage. We've got an op-ed out right now around that, and so I think people should be reaching out to their senators as quickly as they can. Yep. I'll also mention that we're on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is KY Policy. My Twitter handle is @dpugel, and I talk about a lot of this stuff on a basis. There's a whole lot of things we didn't talk about around the safety net, specifically SNAP, and which is food assistance, Medicaid, and KTAP, which is basic cash assistance, and that we're going to be continuing to put information out about that, about the things that have already been done, and some additional ways the governor and the executive branch can be providing for folks who are going to have need real soon here.
Good. Dustin Pugel with Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, thank you so much for your time. I encourage everybody to go look at the website, kypolicy.org, and get lots of information there, and call your senators and ask them to approve Senate Bill 150. Dustin, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bruce.
So that wraps up our show for this week. I want to point out a couple of things. If you believe the work we're doing is important, you can become a member at forwardky.com/join. Encourage you to do that. We exist only on memberships. That's the only, currently, that's all we have in terms of support. And if you have ideas or suggestions for the show, you can send them to tips@forwardky.com, and we'll certainly consider them and try to incorporate them. Thanks again for watching, and this was the State of Kentucky.